Hey everybody, this is Peteaturner, executive producer and host of the Break It Down Show. Our guest today is a guy named Michael Wolff. He's a blues musician. His band is called The Instigators. He's been playing blues for decades, and you're going to love him talking about music. However, the main reason why he's on this show is his nephew was a guy you likely have heard of. His name is Sean Smith, and he was killed in 2012 in the Benghazi consulate attack that took the lives of Navy SEALs Ty Woods and Glen Doherty. And of course, we lost our ambassador to Libya, Christopher Stevens, in that attack. And for those of us that care about this, maybe we've seen the movie 13 Hours. Sean Smith is the computer tech guy from that movie. When push and shove come together, the story that comes out about Benghazi and what happened and why it happened and what decisions were made, it doesn't add up. And so Michael did what Americans are supposed to do, took it up, went to Congress, found some support, and got another investigation put together. And he doesn't let it rest because these kinds of decisions matter. And we have to hold the folks that are elected accountable when things go poorly. I think you'll like this episode. It is going to challenge some of what you think and believe, but here's a guy from the inside talking about it. So let's hear Michael out and see what he says. And then also we're going to talk about some music, so it's not all hard stuff. Hey, listen, support the show. I see you guys doing it. I see the shares. Thank you so much. I see the like, all of these things. The T-shirts did well this last round. I'm going to do another round of them. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All of these things help. We are all the way halfway through the Prison Chronicles production in post. We've got a few more episodes to wrap up, but we're getting very close. Hopefully we'll be putting it out. Gosh, I'm going to say the spring. The date keeps sliding, but the show continues to advance and it's getting closer to the end. I'm super excited about that. Hang in there with me. We're going to get it out soon. As always, Save the Brave, savethebrave.org. Go there, click the donate tab, find a small amount of money each month that you can contribute. Or if you want to do something else, your time, your presence, your attention. One of the things you could do is literally write letters out to the people that give out awards to charities, to grants, and find those and help us communicate. There's a lot of ways to help. It doesn't have to just be money. It can be other things. Either way, here comes Michael Wolff.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is jonleonguerrero.
Hey, and this is Peteaturner.
Hi, this is Michael Wolff-Ingmeyer, and you're listening to The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with JonLeonguerrero and Peteaturner.
But first off, a hat tip over to Denise Simon, who set this up. She got us connected, and it's taken us a while because we're both busy dudes.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, Denise is really good people, so she speaks highly of you.
Yeah. Well, Denise is great, and I really get a kick out of doing her show and exchanging guests and everything. You're a fascinating guy. You've got a lot of different things to say and play. You're part musical blues man. You're also I guess I don't want to take this as a compliment. You're a bit of a political pundit, and in part because your nephew was notably killed when the Benghazi attacks happened. He's the computer guy in this whole story. If you guys saw the 13 Hours or any of those movies, where do you want to start, man?
Well, we can start with that. That's one thing in the sense that, really before 7 years ago, I was not a political pundit. I was just trying to get the next gig, listening to my wife saying, get a real job, writing occasional articles for, sort of music ends of things. Like, I actually did a job writing blues album reviews, like classic album reviews. So I did more of the music historian bit as a writer. And then Sean was killed. Sean was my nephew by marriage, but, I'm from the American South. I was raised here in the South. And, we take family seriously. And I knew within, 24 hours, 48 hours, that something was really, really rotten here. Something smelled incredibly bad.
Hey, this is Peteaturner from the Break It Down Show, checking in real quick to ask you this. John, Scott, and I all support Save the Brave with our time, our location, our effort, and our money. Each month we give a small amount. Do the same with us. Go to savethebrave.org, Click on the donate tab, pick an amount that you want to come out each month, and they will handle all the rest. I stand behind these folks. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the show.
And I knew within, 24 hours, 48 hours, that something was really, really rotten here. Something smelled incredibly bad about the whole distillation from some of the media. Maybe, Fox did a better job than some, but still the media was just saying, well, they're saying it's a video. Mm-hmm. And so I researched this anti-Islamic video that supposedly sparked this murderous rampage from these insurgent rebels, right? And I found that was a bunch of BS. I said, how could this be offensive to anybody? It's like a bad Barat movie, Yeah. I mean, it's like a Barat outtake. Yeah. And I just said, no, something's wrong. So I really had a discernible amount of anger for a couple months, and it really didn't have any sort of outlet other than writing a song or two, right? But, none of that satisfied me. So I heard Frank Wolf, who was a congressman from sort of like the Winchester, Virginia area, speak on the House floor. This was like in December of 2012. So this is like, roughly 2 months after the attack, or so. Actually, almost 3 months. It was about 3 months in December, right? October, November, December. And he said on the House floor, I want to cut all funding to Egypt and Libya until we find out what happened in Benghazi. So I did something that's totally antithetical to my behavior previous to this. And I called up Frank Wolf's office and I said, hey, I really agree with what you guys are saying. And I support the congressman's statement. And I explained who I was. And they said, well, Congressman Wolf will want to speak to you. Of course, I didn't buy that.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Yeah, right. But that night, I see a thing on caller ID on my television set saying, U.S. Capitol. And I said, that's interesting. Who's calling me from the Capitol? And it was this guy, Congressman Frank Wolf. And at that point, he had a bill out there that I think it was, and ended up being House Resolution 824, where he wanted to create a bipartisan select committee to investigate the Benghazi attacks. So this sort of changed my whole reality in a lot of ways. And that's the pinnacle of existence sometimes, is that you get something thrown in your path and you really have no idea how you're going to deal with it until you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So then I started calling congressmen, congressional and senatorial offices, in essence, and asked for them to support Congressman Wolf's efforts. And that ended up being the House Select Committee on Benghazi. And I am humbly speaking, really, I was the first family member to ask for such a committee. And, I'm a relative by marriage, but, it was the right thing to do. What happened to Sean was a travesty. Mm-hmm. What happened to Ambassador Stevens was a travesty, and Doherty and Woods.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole thing stunk. What I want to ask is this. Look, I've worked overseas. I was a spy. And one of the things that I know is that we never have enough security. We never have enough of what we need to keep each other safe reliably. It just doesn't exist. You can ask for it. Right. Every consulate asks for more security. So
right. But they really had a definite need. And, I counter it when people tell me things like that. Because, on another plane of things, people said, well, it was the Republicans, man, that cut the funding, for the security, which was BS. That never happened.
Right.
There was plenty of money in the coffers. What it really was is that Barack Obama was in the middle of an election year, okay? And he didn't want any sort of publicity about this because, hey, he had killed Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda was on the run, which was a bunch of BS. Al-Qaeda was on the run. Yeah, they were running in the streets of Benghazi, setting diesel fuel on fire and firing mortars with, a parade ground precision.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I guess my overall question is not so much like, could they have done more? I mean, how many outposts are putting in requests for more security? Do we have an idea of what the overall security worldwide
Well,
problem is?
It's not even more security. It's the fact that Hillary Clinton, leading up to the Benghazi attack, actually reduced the amount of security.
Yeah.
And that becomes more like malevolent and purposeful to me, you know? To the point that I think they really wanted to treat these folks like collateral damage.
What's your sense for what should have happened? Like, so the whole thing goes down. There's nothing anybody can do about that now. We hold...
No, not now, but at the time, there was more than enough assets. Within 45 minutes, there were assets available to actually handle these guys.
Right.
I mean, shoot, if they got in an F-14 and just buzzed these guys, don't you think that would have gotten their attention?
Well,
no, they just had an unmanned drone hovering overhead filming it so they could watch it in real time.
Yeah, I mean, just having anything fly overhead is going to cause the enemy to change their attitude.
Give them pause. Maybe we should scatter.
Yeah.
Fire a few volleys over their heads. I mean, anything, that would have gotten their attention, and the assets were available.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly were available. As we see this, the whole event happens. Ty and all the rest are killed. Your nephew is gone. What should have happened next instead of the nonsense about... And look, I'll give everybody a grace period of a day or two to figure out what the heck happened, because fog of war is fog of war.
Right, exactly. Hey, you needed more information, you're doing research, whatever. I'll be kind. But for 28 days after the attack, what is Barack Obama saying? Even on the UN floor, it's a video. It's a video that caused these guys to, rampage. It isn't it a tragedy? And we're going to get the filmmaker. Not we're going to get the terrorists that murdered my nephew and 3 other Americans. We're going to get the filmmaker.
Right.
Because he's the one who caused this. And they put that guy in jail, in essence, ruined his existence. So what should have happened if Barack Obama was a man, I mean, with a man like you and I are a man, in the sense when we do something wrong, we got adult 101 at our back, and we know, hey, we made a mistake. We made a horrible mistake. And we're responsible. Other than this, it's a video. What a farce.
Yeah, I mean, the video nonsense was no good. And I guess it goes to the overall lack of foreign policy chops that administration had. Just their overall strategies, let's be honest, they just didn't work out.
Well, it's not only that they didn't work out, is that they were really actually doing a thing. When you really look at what happened in North Africa, it really goes into the basis that it wasn't that Muammar Gaddafi was this horrible guy. Maybe in the past he was, but at that point in 2011, he was a bad dresser and a bad dancer. Okay? The whole thing that happened was there was actually a document a year before Gaddafi was taken out that I'd like to see released. I think it would actually win Trump the 2020 election, to be honest with you, if he released this thing. And I've requested him to release this document directly, as far as emails and stuff. And it's called PSD-11. It's Presidential Study Directive 11 of August of 2010. And this is actually a formulated plan by the Obama administration to change quasi-secular leaders like Gaddafi and the gentleman in Egypt and the gentleman in Tunisia they wanted to have a regime change. So they wanted these guys to be, replaced by members of, in essence, of the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think, maybe, to give really a benefit of the doubt that may not be deserved, maybe he thought that if everybody was on the same page, they'd all get along. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think there's something a little darker and a little bit more malevolent about this.
So, okay, let's talk a little bit more about the foreign policy then. I mean, were you a foreign policy guy at all? Were you aware that your nephew was out working in Libya on an IT contract?
Oh, no, not at all. We weren't even aware at the time that Sean was killed that he was over there for any reason at all. Now, Sean had been over to fairly dangerous places before, when we're talking about security, right? I mean, he had served under Colin Powell. He had served under Condoleezza Rice. And, he went to Baghdad and places that aren't maybe, my choices for vacation spots.
Right, yeah.
Or working situations. But he was protected. He wasn't attacked. He wasn't assaulted. He wasn't murdered.
Right. He wasn't murdered. There's a starting point right there.
Yeah.
So the overall then, for him to be out, that, you guys you weren't really terribly concerned, but when you hear the malfeasance that happens with this whole thing, it really changes how you live your life. I mean, it seems like it
yeah, it really does, because you can't go back to the age of innocence after that. The age of innocence is gone. And, then I start seeing the government for what it is. And when I started really trying to find, what happened there, and sort of like talking to people in the media, talking to people in intelligence, people that, and eventually years later talking to people that actually were on the ground, you really start understanding what a shadow government we have. What that the concept of, when they say it's the deep state, that's actually pretty kind, pretty polite. What we're really dealing with is actually sort of a criminal syndicate disguised as government.
So when you say that, and I'm saying this because I want my people that listen, it's hard to believe. Like, it's hard to stomach that is something that's actually, and I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm just saying it's shocking to have someone say that. So help us understand better what it is that you're saying, because we're frustrated by the government, but this whole deep state thing it's shocking.
To explain Benghazi in a nutshell, after we had the change of leadership, and we have to understand why we had a change of leadership. It wasn't because of the terroristic, tactics of Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi was actually jailing Al Qaeda. In fact, one of the guys that was actually convicted last year of being a participant in the Benghazi attacks, Ahmed Abu Khattala, he was one of the people released from Gaddafi's jail after he was murdered. And the reason that I think they really got NATO involved and the United States got involved was not really to curtail terrorism. It was really because Gaddafi wanted to see the North African region go into a gold standard. In other words, he wanted to be paid for Libyan oil with Libyan gold denier. Well, I mean, you think it was apparently a problem for the French because they went into a tailspin. They said, we can't pay for gold, oil with gold. We have no gold.
Right.
I mean, really. So, I mean, they did not want to take, Libya did not want to take French francs, did not want to take American dollars. They wanted gold. They wanted a gold standard for their economic strata.
Right.
And, when you think about the world money markets, are the people in NATO, France, England, America, they're not prepared to pay for oil with gold.
No?
So, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? Raid Fort Knox? Come on. So, then, we install an ambassador after all this has happened. And we have, his name is Christopher Stevens, and he's protected by an organization called British Blue Mountain, as far as the outskirts of the diplomatic outpost where he's stationed. And British Blue Mountain, which was partially run by Christy Rogers, the wife of Mike Rogers, House Intelligence Committee chairman.
Yeah.
So what happens is that I think, by my research and the time I've spent with this, I think Chris Stevens, they were trying to gather up. One of the big points was that after Gaddafi was deposed, they tried to gather up all these Stinger missiles. All right. And I think actually where they wanted the Stinger missiles and the weapons, we provided, the insurgent rebels of Libya with 400 tons of weapons to get rid of Gaddafi. Okay? That was through American contractors like Mark Turi and people along those lines. They wanted to move those weapons from Libya to Turkey to Syria. And in Syria, those weapons would end up in the hands of people that ended up becoming ISIS. So in essence, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are the godfather and godmother of ISIS.
Yeah, well, and don't forget one of the first things that Hillary Clinton did under her smart diplomacy program as Secretary of State was go back to Somalia and bring them 40 tons of weapons. And then while she's there, evaluating her plan, she thought, you know what? 40 tons just isn't going to do it. We're going to go ahead and double that. So would it surprise you to find out that nobody knows where those weapons are to this day?
No, it wouldn't surprise me, though some have appeared in the hands of ISIS fighters that we've taken out by drone and other methods. So,
for
yeah.
sure.
And also some of those weapons that actually ended up in Benghazi started in another wonderful gun running program that was called Fast and Furious.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, the whole Clinton and Obama thing is, what do you do? We've got a different
Well, you
president
hold people
now.
accountable.
Well,
you hold
for
people
sure.
accountable because of the whole thing about it. When you really look at dereliction of duty, and that's really ultimately what we can describe Benghazi as a point that is really, in essence, a dereliction of duty.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is hold people accountable. Dereliction of duty is a secondary definition is really treason. Treason's just like murder. There's no statute of limitations.
But
These
we
people
can't.
should still be held accountable.
Sure, but I mean, we don't do it though, right? We
No, because we're all locked into the church of the Almighty Me.
Yeah.
So I mean, really, in essence, if the American media and the United States Congress had been doing their flipping jobs, Barack Obama would have never gotten into a second term. I mean, we would have had Mitt Romney, which may not have been really much of a choice.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I don't think he would have, if they would have really covered, if they would have covered Benghazi in the same way that they're covering this sort of farcical impeachment process that's going on, Barack Obama wouldn't have had a chance. I mean, even liberals would have recoiled, but because the American media practiced its own form of a dereliction of duty, we did not know. You had to seek it out. You had to be somebody like me
Mm-hmm.
and various other Americans that have continued to try to hold these people's feet to the fire and actually establish a real atmosphere of accountability.
So, is it possible though to hold whoever accountable? Secretary Clinton, President Obama? Is anybody going to go? No one's going to go back in history and unelect them. They're going to stay elected.
No, but I think they should still be. I think historically speaking, as far as public record and things along those lines,
Yeah.
They should be definitely at least held accountable, at least as far as the public eye and the public knowledge. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you may not be able to, you're obviously not going to get them out of office. They're still there.
Right.
And, I mean, in essence, Hillary Clinton still acts like she's basically, queen of the secretaries of state. And Barack Obama acts like he was like the gentleman president. And he's not. People are very, very nefarious. Actually, rather dark people. If you really examine the full range of scandals in the Obama administration, not just Benghazi, but Fast and Furious, Extortion 17, the FISA abuses, the Fourth Amendment abuses, the, taxpayer, targeting, and then, things like Uranium One, where we sold like 1/3 of our uranium rights to Russia. That's the real Russian collusion story, folks.
Yeah. That's crazy.
No, it's just that you just have to have an attorney general that's willing to, step up and put on his big boy pants or her big boy pants and actually hold these people accountable on the public record.
Okay, so let's go into that a little bit, and again go back to the Obama administration when Secretary, now candidate Clinton, is being investigated by the FBI. First off, we didn't call it an investigation; we called it a probe. That's
Right,
again
we
to
called
your
it a
point
probe.
about the dereliction of duty of the press. Boy, that's a real problem. But also this,
Yeah.
just it's disingenuous to say it was a probe, and then to have her say she did it, and yet nothing ever happened. If your cousin, I'm sorry, your nephew, if he had done something similar, and certainly had the
Right.
means to do it, he would be in jail.
Yeah, exactly. And even if we look at it on the basic structural basis, not even dealing with content, right?
Uh-huh.
But if we looked at, like, say, the average, my wife was, worked for the Department of Defense. She was an IT person, okay? If she had done, like, one of the email violations of the thousands of email violations that Hillary Clinton did, she'd be in jail or at least fined. So, it's also a strata of, like, law for the elites and law for the common man.
Yeah.
And they don't meet. The twain don't meet.
Yeah. You're right about that. It's frustrating.
Sure, it's frustrating. But, the whole thing about it, it's our responsibility as citizens to stand up and hold these people accountable. Even if nothing happens. It's part of the process of really being, for me, to be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had just, like, said, well, I'm just going to continue to play my gigs and write my songs and, maybe I'll find a job and
Yeah.
all these typical stuff that I was dealing with before September 11th, 2012, then none of this would happen. No.
I just got to ask another question about this, just because I'm passionate about what you're passionate about. When you look at something like the emails and there's no culpability, and again, President Clinton goes on to Loretta Lynch's airplane, a clear
violation.
Like,
I mean,
you can't be more clear in your corruption with this whole thing.
Well, I'm sort of a hard-boiled Christian. I mean, I'm not one of these people that wears it on my sleeve. You know what I mean? But I do believe in justice in this world, and I also believe in justice in the next.
Yeah.
So we shall see,
Yeah.
I'm not shutting up, obviously.
Yeah, right. Well, and
Pat
same.
Smith's not shutting up. Charles Woods is not shutting up. Glen Doherty's sister has been remarkable. Katie, great lady, apparently. I've never met her or talked to her, really. But by all accounts, one thing that's happening right now is that we're trying to get a congressional gold medal that acknowledges the 4 victims. There was a bill, and this was actually a bipartisan bill. It was sponsored by a congressman out of Massachusetts named Stephen Lynch. It's currently House Resolution 587. And what it seeks is to posthumously honor the 4 victims with congressional gold medals. What it really will be 1 medal, and it will be oddly enough, if it's awarded, which I think it's going to be, it will be at the Central Intelligence Agency's museum in McLean, Virginia.
Interesting.
Which shocked me because the CIA having a museum. Interesting.
Well, they got a whole wall full of stars. Yeah, they're pretty open about what happens. Is it sort of like a bragging post? Like, this is what we do to people. This is how we go out, and these are our operators for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so bizarre.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see that happen, if nothing else, for the legacy of these guys' children or their surviving family members. In the case of Ambassador Stevens, I'd like to see that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a great thing to be able to give these guys some. I mean, they all die horribly. I mean, needlessly and horribly. And it's just...
and last year at the end of 2018, right? Mm-hmm. There was actually a push for this in the House, and they had a historic moment. They actually had a unanimous voice vote. They all agreed on it. They sent it to the Senate. Senate's too busy looking at their vacation catalogs, So, I mean, it's the end of the year. They're planning their vacation. So that they didn't put it through the Senate. So now it's back on the House floor as the first of this year.
Right.
It's at about 223 co-sponsors at this point. The medal is paid for by the Congressional Finance Office. So the Congressional Finance Office wants like 2/3, which is about 290 co-sponsors.
And is this a bipartisan bill that's being
Yeah, it
supported?
is. I mean, right now, if you go to Congress.gov, folks, and look at HR 587, you will see that there's actually a pretty even line between Republicans and Democrats. This is really interesting when you consider just the backbiting and general mean-spiritedness of Washington. The fact that they actually agree on something that is good, that is noble, and that is worthwhile. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And of course, the media. Where are they? Has the media covered this?
Yeah. So let's talk about music, man. Hey, this is Peteaturner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it. So let's talk about music, man. You are a blues musician.
A lot more fun to talk about.
It's frustrating to me because, we've got a show coming out, next week, and it's a former CIA guy, and I'm a former spy myself, and we get pissed off at the nonsense. Like, if you make bad policy decisions and people die, there needs to be some accountability, and that's exactly what happened here. So it does frustrate me. I understand that running a government is fucking impossible, but let's start with, hey, be above board,
Just man up and say, hey, you know what? I really screwed up here.
Yeah.
There really is no justification for what happened. I made a huge mistake. I would have actually voted for Barack Obama if he had just put on his big boy pants and said, I'm human. I really made an error in judgment with my handling of Libya. I don't know if I might even voted for the guy. I mean, and that's a big if, but nonetheless.
And there's no president out there that's going to do that. But either way, I do want to talk about your music because,
please do.
Yeah, I mean that's we're everything on this show. We talk about life, and politics can frustrate, and let's say this too. All the things that are bad that the president Obama did. Hey, President Bush is wearing just as many problems around his neck.
Oh my God, yeah. I'm not a George Bush fan.
Yeah.
And I am really legitimately registered as an independent because both parties have done their best to make me angry the past 7+ years.
Yeah. Okay. So you're a blues guy.
What do you want to know about the music, though?
Well, so tell me what. So you do blues and you do history. Let's kind of just dive into that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think blues really kind of saved me, I lost my father to, he was a murder victim and a suicide.
Okay.
In other words, it was the first time I actually saw in any sort of written form the term murder-suicide was in the newspaper account of my father's death. I was about 8 years old.
Huh.
And, it's funny, I'm writing about this right now. I write for Politichicks. I write about music. I write about politics. Write a lot of things, of course, about Benghazi. But, in March of about 3 months and a day after my father was murdered, I'm watching this program, To Tell the Truth, right?
Okay.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And it was a long-running program. It ran for 12 years, from 56 to 68, right? And I see this, for the uninitiated, it was like a 4-person celebrity panel, and they had a group of 3 contestants, and they had to pick the central person, and these contestants. In other words, will the real person stand up, in essence, right? The person of interest this time was Paul Butterfield.
Oh, okay. And
that, and I'd already, even at 8, I had already heard the blues. I think the year before that, I saw the Rolling Stones with Howlin' Wolf.
Okay.
So that was my first introduction to blues, watching Shindig and seeing, Howlin' Wolf up there singing for millions of people, and going, wow, what is this? This ain't the Beatles. This isn't the Rolling Stones. This is something completely different and maybe a lot deeper. But I saw Butterfield in March of '66 on To Tell the Truth. And he actually played a song that he made famous called Born in Chicago, old Nick Ravenotti's tune. And I was really, really kind of intrigued. So I go through the typical childhood at this point, but about a year or two later, my mother buys me a guitar. And, she brought me this little nylon string thing. It was obviously more of a toy than anything, right? And I'm playing around with this. And then when I'm 11, I get to see Jimi Hendrix. I actually lied to my mother, said I was going to spend the night at this guy, Bobby Parsons' house, and actually went with a group of other kids and one of the kids' uncle, and saw Jimi Hendrix. And it just totally fried me. I just said, oh my God, this is what I want to do. Look at those girls screaming about him. Oh, wow, this looks like a good job.
Yeah.
So and I've always been sort of like a history buff. So, the nice thing about blues music is that it sort of feeds that whole, history Jones of mine, because it all came from somewhere else.
Right.
So if you look at a Jimi Hendrix or a Rolling Stones, and then you go back and you say, well, there's a Muddy Waters and there's a Howlin' Wolf. Oh, there's a Robert Johnson. Oh, there's a Charlie Patton. And who's the guy before Charlie Patton? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you start seeing like there's actually a historic train of thought and actual application of history in this music. It's not superfluous music. It's music that's actually has substance. It's not all sad music. I think blues is music to really help you accept your life.
Mm-hmm.
More than to wallow in your misery. And, it always made me feel better with listening to good blues or playing good blues.
So blues is your home genre. What else moves you? I mean, jazz comes right off of blues.
Jazz comes right off of blues. And I find I really like, I like a lot of the 1950s jazz, and in particular, the Miles Davis period and stuff like that. I mean, Kind of Blue is still one of my favorite records, without a doubt. But I also have found that not only was blues present in my perspective, but I really like Southern soul music, and I really emphasize Southern soul. I mean, I liked Motown to a degree. I liked, the Four Tops and Marvin Gaye and, the edgier sort of stuff,
Yeah.
But I really like the Southern soul singers, the people like James Carr and Otis Redding, O.V. Wright, and those sort of people. I thought they were really close cousins to the blues.
Okay.
Yeah. And, reggae influence is really...
that's where I was going to go next, was reggae, yeah.
Yeah, because reggae, when you look at... all somebody has to do if they really want to get every style of reggae is go buy the Harder They Come soundtrack.
Uh-huh.
The Jimmy Cliff film.
Yeah.
And if you listen to all the songs in there, you go like, well, this is all the stratas of reggae, blue beat and one drop and all these different sort of terms that you use for reggae are right on that album. And to me, that's like interesting that all these forms of music are really kind of interrelated. Like the Jamaican guys, they were listening to the New Orleans stations. But what they were getting, and I always figured this is why it sounds like that chop, sort of sound, right?
Uh-huh. Is
that they were hearing this New Orleans second line type stuff and hearing this sort of signal fade in and out, That's the interesting thing too about music, in the sense that, and I've been addressing that in this Butterfield and Bloomsfield piece I'm writing, is that radio used to be clear channels, so that somebody like Robbie Robinson, for example, up in Toronto, could be listening to a station out of Nashville, like WLAC, that's playing blues.
Yeah.
So there's almost like what I call a clear channel generation,
huh?
Where these guys that were born in the late 30s to mid 40s all were listening to the same radio stations.
Yeah, getting the same inspirations.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of folks listen to a lot of different things. You can listen to the artist directly. Maybe you have XM, maybe you do Spotify, maybe you do Pandora.
I like Spotify personally. I really do. They have a lot of they sound pretty warm. That's one thing. It doesn't sound like a compressed MP3 download.
Yeah.
It sounds
that's
like,
for sure part of
almost
the thing
like vinyl.
too, right? Yeah. The higher quality music. But the shared listening experience to one voice who actually had the ability to curate an experience during their session has completely left us, and I know we're not the better for it. I mean, yeah, it's great that
we're not.
everybody has access to everything, but that personality that spoke to us and took their knowledge and passed it to us directly through the songs they picked, it's
it's missing in actually because for years there was no FM radio, obviously.
Right.
FM radio was not really like sort of empty airspace.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the radio was AM. And because there was not like any FCC limitation on their signal broadcast range, a lot of people were hearing this stuff. And then FM kind of came in, and I'd say FM had a good, 7 or 8 really good years, from like, say, 65 with Tom Donahue and those people, right? On up. I mean, I grew up in an area which had an incredible FM station, WOWI, which is no longer in existence. But they had DJs on there that, just like you're describing, were people that were passionate about music, that knew about music, that were more than willing to share the information, Mm-hmm. I mean, the first time I heard Robert Johnson was on a radio program. And I was astounded. I said, oh, wow. Who is this guy?
Who is this guy? Who is Robert Johnson?
I actually called in and said, I came up, I called in and had some sort of ruse. I said, I have a friend here. We're trying to decide if that's Blind Lemon Jefferson or Robert Johnson. Could you fill me in on it? That's Robert Johnson. I said, oh, good. Just not knowing why I created the ruse other than just basic, shyness or something, right?
How does Robert Johnson
FM
hold up
radio
today? His music.
Well, it's interesting. It's like his music is still there. I mean, it hasn't gone anywhere. And he's still, I'd say, a major figure in American music. And he's like one of these guys he's like definitely a phantom, he raises his head every once in a while. And there's another generation that kind of embraces that stuff. But Johnson's not for the faint of heart. I mean, that's pretty harrowing stuff.
Yeah. Why is he still relevant though today? I mean, look, yes, we know about Blind This and Muddy That and all the different guys from the proto blues days, but they don't hold court like Robert Johnson does. Is it because he died with so
Robert
much money
is
on the
actually
table?
the founder of what? Well, in popular culture, they have this thing they call the 27 Club, right?
Right, yeah.
So when you look at Robert Johnson, he's like the founder of that whole club. So it's like, here's somebody that comes out, records 29 songs, most of them brilliant,
Yeah.
and dies at the young age of 27 under mysterious circumstances. He actually was poisoned,
Right.
by a jealous husband. So that whole mythology creeps in there. And that's one of the reasons. I think a lot of people are attracted to the myth, and then they get hooked on the music.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it hooked Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton still to this day, if you want to get that guy talking, you can bring up Robert Johnson, and he'll talk about what he still discovers to this day.
Sure. And people like Hendrix. Hendrix was a huge Robert Johnson fan.
Yeah.
And you think about like Hendrix and Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson's also the predecessor to Jimi Hendrix because Robert could play, a couple guitar parts at once and sing and stomp his feet,
Yeah.
and actually have sort of almost like a little one-man band. And, so I could see where that somebody like Robert Johnson would appeal to Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you like that's out there now? I mean, you've got a lot of guys that do blues-based things.
I like Larkin Poe a lot.
Okay.
Have you seen those ladies?
No,
Oh, check them out. They're really, really good. They're like a 2-woman team. One lady plays a lot of lap steel and slide stuff, and the other lady is playing straight guitar and doing the majority of the vocals.
Okay.
And they're covering Charlie Patton, and they're covering Robert Johnson. They're covering a lot of stuff. I think they're really, really brilliant at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I find that there's definitely a young generation out here that's starting to realize that maybe rap isn't it, or maybe country's not it, or maybe rock and roll's not it, and that are embracing the blues again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Why is it such a sticky genre? I mean, rock and roll has completely changed over the years, and if you asked 5 people what that was, they would all give you a different answer. But you ask 5 people if they've just heard the blues, we'd all agree that it was the blues.
Yeah, exactly. But then there are people that I always found to be really kind of interested in that thing. I mean, you got like somebody like, for example, John Lee Hooker, who, you listen to John Lee and it's John Lee. You hear that voice and it's John Lee. A couple sung notes, right?
Yeah.
But I find that blues people generally are pretty progressive in their thought pattern. I find the audience is a little limited sometimes because the audience has this preconception of what they think blues is.
Right.
Because, John Lee Hooker, one of the last things Miles Davis did was play with John Lee Hooker on the Hot Spot soundtrack, the Dennis Hopper film.
Okay.
And it was a Jack Nietzsche production, and Hooker and Miles played together. And they sounded like they'd been playing together for 50 years.
Huh.
It was perfect. And it was two guys that you never would expect to play together. Same thing with a guy that was a mentor to me, Texas blues man by the name of Johnny Copeland. Great guy. Great singer. Great guitar player. But he had a tendency in the 1980s to do a lot of collaborations with avant-garde jazzmen like Arthur Blythe and people like that.
Uh-huh.
So I find blues people to be pretty forward-thinking. I find it the marketing of blues and to a large degree the audience's perception of what blues is pretty limited.
Is that just the state of what the audience has always been? It's always sort of limited, and then there's people that
Well,
get into...
I don't know, because if you think about, if you look at the 1950s, blues was on the top 40.
Yeah.
When you look at a certain strata of time, even more recently, like in the 80s, with like the Fabulous Thunderbirds and Robert Cray and Stevie Ray Vaughan, you had guys that were playing blues that had actually studied under great blues players,
Right.
and were on the top 40 radio. So it's just a matter of promotion and time.
Interesting. What do you think about how artists make money today? Like, you can always get your break because you can make it yourself, but because you got to make it yourself, there's no person that has the industry. They're not sending a guy out to break an album. We had this guy, Jeff Traeger, on, and he used to take albums out, and he would break albums regularly for A&R Records or whoever it was. You don't have that guy on your side anymore.
There's a lack of A&R people. There used to be a whole strata in the record industry of A&R guys.
Okay.
They also called them rack jobbers. People that made sure records were in record stores. Different strata of people actually.
Right.
So you don't really have that now, and now it's like it's really sort of up to the artist. And I find that personally with my own band, which is a 4-piece blues band called the Instigators, right? How appropriately named, right?
Yeah.
I play more events. I don't go out there and hit the bars. I don't go out there and hit the same thing anymore because it's tedious. I've been playing bars since I was 14.
Right. Yeah. Because you wanted that job.
Yeah, because you wanted that job. I wanted that money.
Uh-huh.
Go for that money.
Yeah. Do you like playing your own stuff more, or do you take the paycheck and pay the covers?
I like them both. If I do a cover, you will not see a carbon copy reproduction of the cover. You'll have enough of it that you understand it's a Muddy tune or an Albert King tune or a reggae thing or whatever, right? But I'm going to throw my own soul in there because that's the only way to do it.
Right.
You can't. I can't be a tape recorder. That's for sure.
Where's the best?
And as far as like going out and like seeing me play the best of Southern rock or something, that's just not going to happen. It doesn't move me. If the music doesn't move me, I don't want to play it.
Right. Yeah.
Then it's a farce, and I need to just stay home.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. How do folks find out more about you? Where do you want them to go on social media to find out more about Michael?
Well, they can look me up, Michael Ingmar, Facebook. you know, Michael, A-E-L, and Ingmire, I-N-G-M-I-R-E. They can see my stuff. It's a site that's sort of under construction right now, but I got a Reverb Nation account I've had for years, which is reverbnation.com/Michael Wolf Ingmire. All one phrase, Michael Wolf Ingmire. Wolf doesn't have an E at the end of it. It's just like the animal, you know?
Right.
And then, you know, they can read my work at politichicks.com.
And give us a sense for what you're writing about right now, besides the Butterfield. Like, what are some of your recent articles?
Well, so recently I wrote about Yovanovitch's testimony before the House impeachment inquiry the other week, right?
Uh-huh.
And this relates back to Benghazi, because she had the nerve to say, you know, she was talking about, you know, the people that are foreign service personnel, and she said, we are Ambassador Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, and Glen Doherty. And I wrote a definite answer to that, because I just said, no, you're not Sean Smith. You know, Sean Smith and Ambassador Stevens are not, you know, doing a fellowship at Georgetown University. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, they are physically enabled.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really incredibly self-serving. And I've definitely been dealing with the impeachment process lately, because I did a lot of historical research into what constitutes impeachment, how it was developed, you know, with Ben Franklin and the Constitutional Congress of 1787 and all that. And I was really fascinated by it in the sense of how much of a legal process it was. And, you know, I'm old enough, obviously, at 62 that I saw the Nixon impeachment, you know, issues, and I saw Bill Clinton's issue. And, you know, the thing that's really, and that I had to write about recently, and folks, if they just look up Michael Ingmire on Politichicks, they'll see all this stuff. You know, they can just see the archives. They click on my name in any of the articles. But the thing about it is that there's no solemnity in this process that's going on with President Trump. It's really just like it's an impeachment by innuendo, impeachment by coup.
Huh.
And I think if I'm embarrassed for America, I think it's really it paints an embarrassing face on what America is today.
What is America today, man? What do you think?
Well, you know, I hate to say it, man, but we're really divided as a people, and we've kind of let them do it. And if somebody stopped like arguing with someone about their political point of view, and really started seeing what the source of the problem is, maybe we unify a little bit more. But right now, it's just like, I've never seen this country as divided. I mean, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And you know, I didn't see us as divided as we are now.
Yeah.
And it's really, really sad to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, it should be sad. It's really hard to get our level, you know, 3 separate freedoms protected by 3 different documents. And, you know, it's holding fast. And it's resilient to one person or 2 people, you know. But when over time, it seems like we're just bound and determined to be dominated by one person or one party. And
exactly. Like, and I'll be honest, I'm not really like I said, I'm not really a big fan of the Republican Party right now. I think with the exception of people like Jim Jordan and Louis Gohmert and a few other folks, you know, most of them are pretty cowardly, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And
they need to step up. They seem like they're starting to wake up a little bit, and that's a good thing.
That is a good thing.
And I definitely don't want socialism in America. Socialism is such a, you know, a farce as like any sort of like measurement. But, you know, it's amazing that to me that we elected people that I consider to have, in essence, sort of animal cunning and the intellect of a soap dish, like AOC, for example, and, you know, Talib, and, you know, people like that. It's like, oh, my God, really? Have we really dumbed down society? But, you know, it's not just like a millennial sort of argument, you know, where we say, well, the millennials are dumb and we as adults are really smart. I'm seeing people my own age really kind of getting dumbed down. They're not reading. They're not perceiving. They believe everything the media tells them. And it's tragic. You know, we need to wake up. And we need to realize who the real true enemy is.
Well, I agree to
You
that.
discover the enemy and know its name.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate your time, man. You've come on, you said a lot of stuff and put it to us. I mean, it's hard talking about the big things, big problems that we have to solve. And if we don't do it, we sure as heck get a whole lot of stuff we don't want. So thank you for being out there and fighting that for us too, man. That's not easy to do.
Hey, man, that's what I'm here for. Thank you for having me on and talking about the music as well as all this.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Well, we all need music in our lives. Like you said, you play things that are good for your heart and you radiate that out to other people, and music heals and music inspires. And, you know, I've been picking up.
And there's
my
a lot of
guitar
reasons
lately.
to play the blues in America right now. You know, it really is.
Yeah. Well, Michael, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure, Pete. You have a good night.